You know that feeling when you finally stop moving, when you sit down after a long day and suddenly become aware of how exhausted you actually are. That heaviness in your chest that wasn't there this morning, the tightness in your jaw you didn't notice until now. Here's what nobody tells you. That exhaustion isn't just from what you did today. It's from carrying the weight of every choice you've ever made, every word you've spoken, every thought you've repeated 1,000 times. Your body, your beautiful, patient body, has been keeping score. Right now, in this moment, you are the sum total of everything you've ever done. Not as judgment, not as cosmic punishment, but as simple truth, like how a garden reflects what was planted months ago. The Buddha taught this in the very first verses of the Dhammapada. He said, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought. We are formed and molded by our thoughts." If your life feels out of balance right now, if peace feels impossibly far away, if you're bone tired from trying so hard, it's because somewhere along the way, you planted seeds you didn't mean to. Seeds of rushing, seeds of pushing, seeds of never being enough. But seeds can be replanted. Get comfortable, really comfortable. Blanket, pillow, whatever helps you soften. And if it feels right, share where in the world you're listening from. Let's begin this together. Let's talk about karma. And I know what might be running through your mind right now. You've heard this word before. Maybe it showed up in a movie, or someone said, "That's karma," when something bad happened to someone who deserved it. But what the Buddha taught about karma has nothing to do with cosmic revenge or some universal scoreboard keeping track of who's been naughty or nice. Karma is simpler than that, and more profound. The word karma just means action. That's it. Every movement you make, every word you speak, every thought you think, these are all karma. They're energy you're putting into motion. And here's the beautiful, sometimes challenging truth, that energy doesn't just disappear into thin air. It shapes you. It shapes your experience. It shapes what comes next. Think of it like this. If you plant tomato seeds in your garden, you don't get surprised when tomatoes grow. You don't stand there saying, "Why is the universe punishing me with tomatoes? I wanted roses." The garden simply reflects what was planted. There's no judgment in it, no cosmic court deciding your fate, just cause and effect, playing out naturally. Your life works the same way. Every moment you're alive, you're gardening, planting seeds with your choices, your words, your habitual ways of responding to what happens. Some of these seeds you plant consciously, with full awareness. But most of them get planted without you even noticing. You're running patterns you inherited, repeating behaviors you learned so long ago you can't remember learning them. And then you wonder why certain things keep growing in your life. Why the same conflicts keep appearing in different relationships. Why you feel anxious even when everything is supposedly fine. Why peace feels so far away, even though you keep trying to find it. In the Samyutta Nikaya, one of the earliest Buddhist texts, the Buddha explains this with remarkable clarity. He says, "I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and have my actions as my refuge. Whatever I do for good or for evil, to that will I fall heir." This isn't about punishment or reward from some external force. It's about natural consequence. Like gravity, not moral, not personal, just how reality works. You are, right now, living in the world your past actions created. Your health, your relationships, the quality of your mind, the ease or difficulty you experience, all of it grows from seeds you've been planting, sometimes without even knowing it. And right now, in this very moment, you're planting seeds for tomorrow. Take a breath and let that sink in for a moment. You're not powerless. You're not stuck. Right now, you have the capacity to plant something different. The Buddha taught that we create 4 different types of karma every single day, often without realizing it. Understanding these 4 types is like getting a map to your own inner landscape, a way of seeing the invisible patterns that have been shaping your experience. The first type is what the Buddha called unwholesome karma, akusala, in the ancient Pali language. These are actions, words, and thoughts rooted in what he identified as the 3 poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. Now, when you hear words like poisons, it might sound harsh, judgmental. But the Buddha wasn't moralizing. He was a physician of the mind, carefully diagnosing what creates suffering. These aren't sins that make you a bad person. They're simply patterns that create pain for yourself and for others. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha teaches, there are these 3 roots of what is unskillful. Greed is a root of the unskillful. Hatred is a root of the unskillful. Delusion is a root of the unskillful. Let's look at these closely, not from a distance, but as they actually show up in your life. Greed, or we might call it craving, grasping, the compulsive reaching for what we think will make us complete. You might notice this when you want something so badly that the wanting itself becomes painful. Maybe it's wanting someone to respond to your message, and you check your phone every few minutes, your stomach tight with anticipation. Maybe it's wanting recognition at work, and you find yourself subtly competing with colleagues, putting others down to make yourself look better. Maybe it's wanting to feel different than you do right now, less anxious, less sad, less empty, so you reach for something to fill the gap. Food, distraction, scrolling, shopping, anything to avoid the feeling. And afterwards, can you notice what happens? The wanting doesn't get satisfied. It just finds a new object. The emptiness doesn't get filled. It just gets temporarily covered over. This is greed, creating its own suffering, like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. Then there's hatred, or aversion, anger, the pushing away of what is. This might be the most familiar poison for many of us. You might notice it when someone criticizes you, cuts you off in traffic, gets the promotion you wanted, says something that triggers your deepest insecurity. Something inside you catches fire instantly. Your jaw tightens. Your thoughts become sharp, cutting. You rehearse arguments in your mind, building your case for why you're right and they're wrong. And these moments can follow you for hours, days, even years. There might be people you haven't spoken to in a decade, but the argument you had with them still lives in your body, still creates tension when you think about it. The Buddha compared this to holding a hot coal in your hand, planning to throw it at someone else. Who gets burned first? The third poison is delusion, not stupidity, but the fundamental misunderstanding of how things actually are. We think things are permanent when they're constantly changing. We think happiness comes from getting what we want, even though experience shows us repeatedly that it doesn't last. We think we're separate from everything else, when we're actually woven into the fabric of all life, interdependent with everything. This delusion is the most subtle of the three poisons, but in many ways, the most dangerous. Because when you don't see reality clearly, all your actions are built on a faulty foundation. In the famous fire sermon, the Buddha taught that everything is burning, burning with the fire of greed, the fire of hatred, the fire of delusion. And this burning creates suffering, just as surely as putting your hand in a flame creates pain. This is unwholesome karma, not because you're a bad person for experiencing greed or anger or confusion. Everyone does. It's part of being human. But because these mental states, when acted upon, create friction in your life, they're like swimming upstream against a powerful current. You can do it, but it drains you, and you don't get very far. Now breathe for a moment. If you're recognizing yourself in these patterns, that's actually a good sign. Awareness is always the first step toward freedom. The second type is wholesome karma, kusala. These are actions, words, and thoughts rooted in their opposites: generosity instead of greed, loving, kindness instead of hatred, wisdom instead of delusion. The Buddha taught, there are these three roots of what is skillful. Non-greed is a root of the skillful. Non-hatred is a root of the skillful. Non-delusion is a root of the skillful. Notice the language: skillful, not virtuous or morally superior. The Buddha is pointing to what works, what creates ease and well-being, what flows with reality instead of against it. There's a teaching story from the time of the Buddha about a woman named Kisagotami who came to him in unbearable grief. Her young child had died, and she was carrying the body, unable to accept what had happened. She went from house to house, begging for medicine to bring her child back to life. People thought she'd lost her mind. But someone, seeing her suffering with compassion, suggested she go to the Buddha. When she arrived, the Buddha didn't tell her that her child was gone. He didn't lecture her about impermanence or try to fix her grief with philosophy. He didn't dismiss her pain or tell her to accept what she couldn't yet accept. Instead, he gave her a simple task, one that would allow her to discover the truth herself. Go into the village, he said gently, and bring me a mustard seed from any household that has never known death. She went immediately, hope rising in her chest, certain she would find this seed and save her child. At the first house, she knocked and asked, "Has anyone in this household ever died?" "Oh yes," they said, their faces softening with their own grief. "We lost our father last year. The pain nearly destroyed us. Some days it still does." She thanked them and moved to the next house. "Has death ever come here?" "Our grandmother died just last month. We still set a place for her at dinner sometimes, forgetting she's gone." House after house, the answer was the same. Every family had known loss. Every household had buried someone they loved. Death had touched everyone, the rich and the poor, the young and the old, the holy and the ordinary. By the time Kisagotami returned to the Buddha, she carried no mustard seed. But something in her had fundamentally shifted. She understood that she wasn't alone in her suffering, that death is not a punishment or an exception, but the nature of all living things. And in that understanding, not in bypassing her grief, but in seeing the truth of impermanence, she found the beginning of peace. She was able to bury her child. She became one of the Buddha's followers, and the texts say she eventually reached full awakening. This story illustrates wholesome karma. not the action of walking door to door. Anyone could do that. But the movement toward reality instead of away from it. The willingness to see what's true, even when it breaks your heart open. You might recognize this pattern in smaller moments of your own life. When you tell the truth instead of a convenient lie, even when it's uncomfortable, can you feel the relief in your chest? A lightness, an opening, a sense of alignment with what's real. When you choose kindness instead of revenge, even when you're hurt and part of you wants to hurt back, there's a softening that happens. A return to your own humanity, your own tenderness beneath the armor. When you let yourself rest instead of pushing through exhaustion to prove you're productive enough, there's a homecoming, a sense of sanity returning, a reconnection with the simple wisdom of your own body. This is wholesome karma, not self-righteous or superior, just aligned with how things actually are. Working with the current instead of against it. The Buddha called this having the wind at your back. You're still walking, still making effort, still moving through difficulty. But reality supports you instead of resisting you. You're moving with the grain of things instead of constantly fighting against it. Now, the third type of karma, and this is where most of our lives actually happen, is neutral karma. In the traditional teachings, this refers to actions that don't particularly create suffering or ease. Brushing your teeth, walking from one room to another, tying your shoes. The countless small movements of being alive that we do without much awareness. Most people live 90% of their lives in this neutral zone, going through the motions on autopilot, like sleepwalkers, moving through their days, eating without tasting, scrolling without seeing, speaking without really listening to our own words, moving through life like a person only half awake. And here's where something remarkable becomes possible. What if these neutral actions, the ones you're doing anyway, the ones that fill up most of your day, could become something more? This brings us to the fourth type of karma, what the Buddha called transcendent or liberating karma. In the ancient language, this is called lokutara, that which goes beyond the world, beyond the cycle of suffering. The Majjhima Nikaya contains a discourse where the Buddha explains this. He's not talking about special holy actions reserved for monks and nuns. He's talking about any action performed with complete presence, with wisdom, with the intention to wake up and be free. There's a famous teaching story that illustrates this perfectly. A young monk came to study at a monastery with grand ambitions burning in his heart. He wanted to unlock the mysteries of consciousness, to achieve profound meditative states, to study with the great masters, to become enlightened. Instead, he was assigned to the kitchen to wash dishes. Day after day, meal after meal, there were the bowls, sticky with rice, crusted with food, never ending. At first, he was bitter about this assignment. He'd watch other monks meditating in the hall, their faces serene and concentrated. He'd see them studying ancient texts with the senior teachers, receiving profound instructions. Meanwhile, he had dishwater-wrinkled hands and the same repetitive task that seemed to have nothing whatsoever to do with enlightenment. His teacher noticed his resentment, the tight shoulders, the clenched jaw, the way he attacked the dishes with barely contained frustration. One day, the teacher gave him new instructions. Wash each bowl as if you're washing the Buddha's own bowl. Give it your complete attention. Feel the temperature of the water on your hands. Notice the weight and texture of each dish. Watch how the soap creates bubbles that catch the light and shimmer with colors. Listen to the sound of water. Be fully present with this one simple task, as if nothing else in the entire world exists. The monk thought this was absurd, spiritual bypassing to keep him from the real teachings, a trick to make him accept his lowly position. But he tried it anyway, mostly because he had no choice. And something extraordinary happened. When he brought his full attention to washing dishes, not thinking about what he'd rather be doing, not lost in fantasies about his future enlightenment, not consumed by resentment about his present circumstances, not anywhere but right here with warm water and soap and ceramic, he discovered a quality of peace he'd never found in all his reading about meditation. The dishes didn't change. The task didn't suddenly become more important or meaningful on its own. But his relationship to it transformed completely. He found presence, clarity, stillness, the ability to be fully here, fully alive, even while doing the most ordinary thing. And in that transformation, he found what he'd been seeking all along. This is transcendent karma. Not actions that are inherently more spiritual than others, but any action, absolutely any action, performed with complete awareness, with wisdom, with the sincere intention to wake up. The Buddha taught this principle clearly in the Satipatthana Sutta, the foundational discourse on mindfulness. He said that a practitioner should bring full awareness to every activity. When walking, one knows one is walking. When standing, one knows one is standing. When sitting, one knows one is sitting. When lying down, one knows one is lying down. This sounds almost too simple to be profound. But notice what he's pointing to: complete presence with what is actually happening, rather than being lost in thoughts about the past or fantasies about the future. Meditation can be transcendent karma or it can be just another item on your to-do list, checked off mechanically while your mind wanders the entire time. Compassion can be transcendent, or it can be performance, done because of how it makes you look, or the story you can tell about yourself as a spiritual person. Even washing dishes can become a doorway to freedom if you bring your whole self to it. The difference isn't in the action itself. It's in the quality of mind you bring to it, the awareness that infuses it, the intention that guides it. The Buddha illustrated this with a teaching about giving. He said that two people could give the exact same gift, let's say, food, to someone who's hungry. One person gives because they genuinely see the suffering of hunger and want to help ease it, with no other agenda, no thought of reward, just simple human care. The other person gives because they want to be seen as generous, or because they feel guilty if they don't, or because they're trying to accumulate merit, like collecting points in some spiritual loyalty program. The external action looks identical. Same food, same hungry person, same outcome on the surface. But the karma, the imprint it leaves on the giver's mind, the seeds it plants for the future, the direction it moves them, is completely different. One creates more genuine connection, more openness of heart, more capacity to see and respond to suffering without making it about yourself. The other creates more self-consciousness, more subtle separation between self and other, more treating life as a transaction where you're trying to get something: approval, recognition, spiritual advancement. In the Kalama Sutta, the Buddha gives perhaps his most practical teaching on how to discern wholesome from unwholesome karma. He tells a group of villagers not to believe something just because it's written in scriptures, or because a teacher said it, or because it's traditional, or even because he himself taught it. Instead, he says, when you know for yourselves that certain things are unwholesome and wrong and bad, then give them up. And when you know for yourselves that certain things are wholesome and good, then accept them and follow them. How do you know? By observing the results in your own direct experience. When you act from greed, from grasping, from the compulsive need to acquire or achieve, what happens in your body? Do you feel lighter or heavier? More at peace or more agitated? More connected to life or more isolated in your wanting? When you act from anger, from the need to defend yourself and prove yourself right, what's the result? Does it bring you closer to peace or further from it? Does it heal the relationship or deepen the wound? When you act from delusion, from not seeing things as they actually are, where does it lead? Does it create more clarity or more confusion? And when you act from generosity, from genuine care, from wisdom that sees the interconnection of all things. What grows from that? Your body knows the answer before your mind does. There's a felt sense of rightness when you're aligned with reality, a sense of flow, of coming home to yourself. And there's a friction, a resistance, a subtle wrongness when you're moving against the grain of things. The Buddha wasn't asking you to believe him. He was inviting you to become a scientist of your own experience, to observe carefully and honestly what creates suffering and what creates freedom. Think about your own life right now. Can you sense the difference between actions you take on autopilot and actions you do with real presence? Between kindness that flows from actually seeing someone and kindness that's trying to prove you're a good person. Between work that comes from genuine care and work that comes from fear of being judged as inadequate. You know the difference. Even when you lie to yourself about it, some part of you knows. When you act from a place of true presence and care, there's a rightness to it you can feel in your bones. When you act from fear or habit, or the need to perform for others, there's a hollowness, an incompleteness, no matter how perfectly you execute the action. The Buddha wasn't demanding you become perfect. He wasn't asking you to transform every moment into enlightened action overnight. He was simply inviting you to notice, to become aware of the patterns you're running, the seeds you're planting, the life you're creating with each small choice. Because here's the truth that makes all of this hopeful rather than overwhelming. If everything you're experiencing right now is the result of past actions, past choices, past patterns, then everything you'll experience tomorrow is being shaped by what you're doing right now. You're not stuck with the garden you've already grown. You can plant new seeds today. Right now, this very moment. You can notice the pattern of immediately reaching for your phone when you're uncomfortable and choose to sit with the discomfort for just one breath instead. You can catch yourself about to speak harshly and choose silence or softness instead. You can feel the familiar pull toward the old harmful pattern and choose, just this once, something different. These aren't grand gestures. They're not dramatic transformations that will impress anyone or look good on social media. They're just small redirections, tiny course corrections that nobody else might even notice. But repeated over time, these small changes create massive transformation. One morning of presence instead of immediately grabbing your phone won't revolutionize your life. But 200 mornings will reshape your nervous system, your capacity for peace, your relationship with reality itself. One moment of choosing kindness instead of defensiveness won't heal a broken relationship. but 1,000 moments might create something new, something neither of you thought was possible. This is the map the Buddha offers you. 4 types of actions, 4 different directions your energy can move. The unwholesome patterns rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion that create friction and suffering. The wholesome patterns rooted in generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom that create ease and connection. The neutral actions that could become doorways to presence if you brought awareness to them. And the transcendent actions that fundamentally change the direction you're heading, that free you from old patterns of suffering. You don't have to figure it all out at once. You don't have to become a different person by tomorrow morning. The path is gentler than that. Just notice. Just begin to see the patterns. Just start asking yourself, what am I planting right now with this choice, this word, this thought? And when you catch yourself planting seeds of suffering, when you notice the anger arising, the defensiveness activating, the old story starting to play, you don't have to judge yourself harshly. You just have to recognize it. Oh, this is that pattern again. This is me swimming upstream again. And then, if you can, you make a different choice. Not because you're trying to be morally superior, not because you're afraid of cosmic punishment, but because you're tired of creating your own suffering. Because you've tasted the difference between friction and flow. Because you want to live with the wind at your back, instead of constantly fighting against a current you can't see. This is karma without the mystery. Just cause and effect, just actions and their natural consequences. Just the simple, profound truth that what you do matters, not because someone is watching and judging from above, but because you are literally creating your experience of life with every choice you make. The heaviness you feel on some days, the lightness you feel on others, the quality of your relationships, the state of your mind, the experience of living in your own body. All of it, every single bit of it, growing from seeds you've planted. And right now, in this very moment, you're planting seeds for tomorrow. What do you want to grow? There's a moment in the Buddha's life that often gets lost in the drama of the larger story. It's quiet, simple, easily overlooked. But it contains everything you need to understand about finding balance in your life. The Buddha, still Siddhartha then, not yet awakened, was sitting beneath a tree by a river, his body weakened from years of extreme practice. A village woman named Sujata came to that spot, carrying a bowl of rice milk, a simple, nourishing porridge she'd prepared as an offering. When she saw him there, she offered the bowl with reverence. And Siddhartha, who had been refusing proper nourishment for so long, accepted it. The texts describe what happened next with beautiful simplicity. As he drank, his strength returned. His mind cleared. His body steadied. He could sit upright without collapsing. He could breathe deeply. He could think clearly for the first time in years. That night, properly nourished, he sat in meditation and awakened fully. Now, the usual way this story is told focuses on what came before, the 6 years of starvation, the extreme asceticism, all of that. But what I want you to notice is something simpler and more intimate. The bowl of rice milk wasn't magic. It wasn't a special spiritual food. It was just nourishment at the right time, accepted with wisdom rather than refused out of rigid principle. This is what the Buddha later called the middle way. Not a philosophy to study, but a living wisdom about meeting yourself and your life with balance. And here's what matters for your life right now. You probably need your own bowl of rice milk. Maybe not literal food, though that might be part of it. But some form of nourishment you've been refusing because you believe you should be able to do without it. Some gentleness you've been denying yourself because you think real growth only comes through harshness. Some rest you've been avoiding because you're afraid that if you stop pushing, you'll never start again. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you've been so comfortable, so careful to avoid all difficulty, that you've forgotten what it feels like to challenge yourself, to grow, to discover what you're capable of when you step beyond the familiar. The middle way addresses both of these patterns. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Buddha's first teaching after his awakening, he explains it clearly. He speaks of two extremes that don't lead to freedom: the extreme of indulging every comfort and desire, and the extreme of harsh self-denial and punishment. Then he says, the middle way discovered by the Tathagata avoids both these extremes. It gives vision, it gives knowledge, and it leads to peace, to direct awakening, to enlightenment. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say the middle way is easy or comfortable or free from challenge. He says it gives vision, the ability to see clearly what's actually happening, rather than being lost in extremes. You might recognize these extremes in your own life. There are areas where you push yourself relentlessly, demanding perfection, allowing no space for being human. You work too many hours, say yes to everything, exercise until you're injured, expect yourself to never need rest or tenderness or help. And there are other areas where you've given up entirely, where you stay only in what's comfortable, where you avoid any challenge or growth, because discomfort feels unbearable. Or you might swing between these extremes, pushing hard until you burn out, then collapsing into avoidance, then pushing hard again in a cycle that never finds sustainable ground. The Buddha understood this pattern intimately. And what he discovered wasn't a rigid middle point you find once and stay at forever. He discovered something more subtle, a constant tuning, a continuous adjustment, a responsive wisdom that keeps finding balance as circumstances change. Let me share a teaching that doesn't get talked about as much, but speaks directly to this. In the Meghiya Sutta, there's a story about a monk named Meghiya who was the Buddha's attendant. One day, Meghiya saw a beautiful mango grove and thought it would be the perfect place to meditate. He asked the Buddha for permission to go practice there. The Buddha said, "Wait a little, Meghiya. We are alone here. Wait until another monk comes." But Meghiya was insistent. He thought he'd found the perfect external conditions for practice, the beautiful grove, the quiet, the ideal setting. He asked 2 more times, and finally, the Buddha gave permission. Meghiya went to the grove and tried to meditate. But his mind wouldn't settle. Instead, he was plagued by 3 kinds of thoughts: sensual thoughts, malicious thoughts, and cruel thoughts. The beautiful external conditions did nothing to calm his inner turmoil. He returned to the Buddha discouraged, confused about why the perfect setting had failed him. The Buddha then taught him something profound about balance and maturity. He explained that for a mind not yet mature in practice, 5 things need to be developed: good friendship, virtue, inspiring conversation about the teachings, energy properly applied, and wisdom. Then he said something that cuts to the heart of the middle way. When these 5 things are developed and cultivated, 4 more should be developed: meditation on the unattractive, to abandon lust; loving kindness to abandon ill will; mindfulness of breathing to cut off discursive thinking; and perception of impermanence to uproot the conceit, "I am." What's beautiful about this teaching is that the Buddha doesn't say Meghiya was wrong to want to practice. He doesn't criticize the desire for meditation or call it spiritual bypassing. Instead, he points to the reality that practice requires the right conditions, not external conditions like a beautiful grove, but internal conditions of preparation and balance. This is crucial for understanding the middle way in your own life. Sometimes what looks like failure or inability is actually just a mismatch between where you are and what you're attempting. You might notice this in your own experience. Maybe you've tried to establish a meditation practice, and you chose the perfect cushion, the perfect time of day, the perfect quiet space. But when you actually sat down to practice, your mind was chaos. And instead of recognizing that you might need to develop certain foundations first, perhaps starting with just 3 minutes instead of 30, perhaps focusing on simple breathing rather than complex techniques, you decided you're just bad at meditation. Or maybe you decided to completely change your diet, to start exercising daily, to transform your life overnight. And when that extreme makeover didn't stick, when you couldn't sustain that level of change, you concluded you have no willpower or discipline. The middle way teaching asks, what if the problem isn't that you're weak or incapable, but that you're trying to tune the string too tight, too fast? What if sustainable change requires building foundations, developing capacity gradually, finding the right tension for where you actually are right now rather than where you think you should be? The Buddha's teaching to Megya offers specific guidance here. He doesn't tell him to try harder or to give up on meditation. He tells him what needs to be developed first: good friendship, ethical conduct, inspiring conversations about practice, properly applied energy, and wisdom. You can translate this into your own life. If you're trying to change a pattern and it's not working, perhaps you need more support, someone who understands what you're attempting and can encourage you. Perhaps you need to address ethical issues in your life that are creating internal friction. Perhaps you need to spend time reading or listening to teachings that inspire you, rather than just willpower your way through. Perhaps you need to adjust your energy, not pushing so hard, or perhaps pushing more in certain areas you've been avoiding. Perhaps you need more understanding of why this change matters and how it actually works. This is the middle way in action, not just moderating extremes, but wisely understanding what conditions support growth and what conditions undermine it. There's another lesser-known teaching that addresses this directly. In the Kitagiri Sutta, the Buddha is teaching 2 monks about sense restraint, the practice of not getting lost in sensory experience. He tells them that sense restraint is important for developing concentration and wisdom. But then he adds something crucial. If you practice restraint in a way that makes you stressed, anxious, or exhausted, that's too tight. If you practice with no restraint at all, just following every impulse, that's too loose. The middle way is practicing restraint without creating tension and stress, while also not abandoning the practice entirely. This teaching beautifully captures what balance actually means. It's not about finding some mathematical midpoint between 2 extremes. It's about finding the approach that's both effective and sustainable, that actually moves you toward freedom without creating new forms of suffering. You can apply this to anything in your life. Let's say you're trying to change your relationship with your phone, with social media, with the constant digital distraction that fragments your attention. The extreme of too tight might be, I'm deleting all social media, throwing my phone away, completely disconnecting from the digital world. That might work for some people in some circumstances, but for most of us, it creates so much stress and inconvenience that it's not sustainable. You might manage it for a week, maybe 2, but then you're back to old patterns with added shame about failing. The extreme of too loose might be, I'll just keep scrolling whenever I feel like it. Trying to change this is too hard. This is just how life is now. Everyone does it. The middle way might be, I'll notice when I'm reaching for my phone out of habit rather than necessity. I'll create some simple boundaries, not checking it first thing in the morning, leaving it in another room, during meals, having certain times when I'm fully present. And I'll do this with kindness toward myself when I slip, knowing that changing patterns takes time. Can you feel how that middle approach is neither harsh nor permissive? It has both care and discipline, both gentleness and strength. This is the wisdom the Buddha was pointing to. Not a rigid rule that applies to everyone the same way, but a living responsiveness to what's actually needed. And here's what's essential to understand. Your middle way will change as you change. What's balanced for you today might be too much or too little 6 months from now. What felt like the right amount of challenge last year might feel overwhelming this year, or it might feel too easy. In the Anguttara Nikaya, there are teachings about the seasons of practice, how sometimes you need to emphasize energy and effort, and other times you need to emphasize tranquility and ease. The wise practitioner knows which season they're in and adjusts accordingly. Think about the natural world for a moment. A tree doesn't push for growth in winter. It doesn't berate itself for going dormant, for pulling energy inward, for appearing to do nothing while its roots consolidate and prepare for spring. And in spring, it doesn't hold back out of fear or doubt. It doesn't say, I've been resting so long, maybe I should rest a little more to be safe. It responds to the conditions, putting out new growth, using the energy it stored during winter. Summer brings a different energy, full expression, ripening, the abundance of growth realized. And then autumn asks for something else, letting go, releasing what's no longer needed, preparing again for rest. You have seasons too. Times when you have energy and capacity for growth, for challenge, for pushing your edges. Times when what you planted earlier is ripening, and you need to simply maintain and allow. And times when you need to let things fall away, to consolidate, to rest, to be gentle with yourself, while your system integrates and prepares for the next phase. The middle way isn't about maintaining the same level of effort all the time. It's about being honest with yourself, about what season you're in, and responding wisely. You might notice, for instance, that there are weeks when you wake up with energy, with clarity, with a natural momentum toward practice and growth. In those times, the middle way might mean riding that wave, not pushing so hard you burn out, but also not holding back out of habit or fear. And there are other times when you wake up already depleted, when life has asked more of you than you have to give, when just getting through the day feels like an accomplishment. In those times, the middle way looks completely different. It might mean radical rest, minimal expectations, tremendous gentleness with yourself. Neither of these is better or worse. Neither is more spiritual or advanced. They're both expressions of wisdom, responding to actual conditions rather than following a rigid rule. This requires regular check-ins with yourself, not obsessive self-monitoring, but honest reflection. You might ask yourself weekly or even daily, how is my energy right now? Am I pushing too hard, creating stress and resistance? Or am I backing off too much, avoiding growth out of fear or habit? What would bring me back to balance? These questions aren't meant to create more anxiety or self-judgment. They're meant to help you tune the instrument of your practice, to find that place where the string produces clear, resonant sound. And here's something important. You'll need to learn the difference between the discomfort of healthy challenge and the distress of pushing too far. Healthy challenge feels enlivening even when it's difficult. There's a sense of stretching into new capacity, of discovering what you're capable of. Your body might be working hard, but there's a quality of aliveness to it, not depletion. Pushing too far feels different. There's a brittleness to it, a sense of forcing, a quality of violence toward yourself, even if it's subtle. Your body tenses in a way that's protective rather than engaged. Your mind becomes rigid rather than focused. Learning to distinguish between these takes time and attention. You have to actually feel into your experience rather than just following rules about what you should be doing. This is part of what the Buddha meant when he said, "The middle way gives vision." It develops your capacity to see clearly what's actually happening in your body and mind, rather than just following concepts about what practice should look like. And sometimes you'll get it wrong. You'll tune too tight or too loose. You'll think you're in balance and then realize you've drifted into an extreme. This is part of the process. This is how you learn where your edges are, what balance actually feels like in your body and mind. The invitation is to meet these moments of imbalance with curiosity rather than judgment. Oh, interesting. I've been pushing too hard and now I'm exhausted. What can I learn from this? How can I adjust? Or, oh, I notice I've been avoiding all challenge for weeks now, staying only in comfort. What gentle step toward growth might serve me right now? This is what the Buddha meant when he said the middle way gives vision. It's the vision to see clearly what's actually happening, rather than being lost in rigid rules or complete chaos. The Buddha also taught that the middle way requires what we might call self-compassion, though he used different language for it. In the Metta Sutta, the discourse on loving kindness, he teaches that we should develop a heart of loving kindness for all beings, including ourselves. This isn't self-indulgence. It's wisdom. Because if you treat yourself harshly, if you demand perfection, and punish yourself for being human, you're tuning the string too tight. It will break, or it will create such an unpleasant sound that you'll abandon the practice entirely. But if you're so gentle that you never challenge yourself, never ask yourself to grow beyond what's comfortable, you're tuning the string too loose. It won't produce the clear tone of awakening. The middle way holds both, the compassion that allows you to be human and imperfect, and the wisdom that knows growth requires stepping beyond the familiar. Think about how you speak to yourself when you make a mistake or fall short of your expectations. Is your inner voice harsh, critical, demanding? Or is it so permissive that it never encourages you toward growth? The middle way voice might sound like, yes, you slipped into that old pattern again. That's okay. You're learning. What do you notice about what triggered it? What might you do differently next time? It's honest, without being cruel. It acknowledges the reality, without creating shame. It holds space for growth, without demanding perfection. This is the path the Buddha discovered that day when he accepted the bowl of rice milk from Sujata. Not the extreme of punishing the body to free the mind. Not the extreme of indulging every desire and never challenging yourself. But the wise middle path that nourishes what needs to be nourished and challenges what needs to be challenged. And this path is available to you right now. You don't need to wait until you've reached some extreme before you find balance. You can start tuning the string today, listening for that tone that resonates true. Where in your life are you pushing too hard? Where are you avoiding growth? Where do you need more nourishment? And where do you need more challenge? These aren't questions to answer once and be done with. They're questions to keep asking, to keep exploring as your life unfolds and changes. The middle way isn't a destination. It's a way of walking, a way of being, a continuous adjustment toward balance and wisdom. And right now, in this moment, you can take one small step toward that balance. Not a dramatic transformation, not a complete overhaul of your life. Just one honest look at where you are, and one gentle adjustment toward the middle. Maybe it's accepting the bowl of rice milk you've been refusing, the rest you need, the help you've been too proud to ask for, the gentleness you've been denying yourself. Or maybe it's stepping out of comfort into healthy challenge, having that difficult conversation, starting that practice you've been avoiding, taking one small risk toward growth. That's all the Buddha is asking. That's all this ancient teaching requires. Just the willingness to keep tuning, to keep listening, to keep finding your way back to balance when you drift into extremes. This is the path that leads to peace. Not someday, not when you finally get it perfect, but right here, right now, in the honest, imperfect process of finding your way. There's something running your life that you didn't consciously choose. Patterns so familiar, you don't even notice them anymore. Ways of responding, ways of speaking, ways of moving through your day that happen automatically, like a program running in the background of your mind. You might notice this when you suddenly realize you've eaten an entire meal without tasting a single bite. Or when you find yourself in the middle of an argument you didn't mean to start, saying words you've said 100 times before, following a script you don't remember writing. Or when you reach for your phone without even deciding to, your hand moving before your conscious mind registers the impulse. These aren't moral failures. They're not signs that something is fundamentally wrong with you. They're just patterns, habits of body and mind that formed over time, often when you weren't paying attention, often in response to pain or fear or circumstances you couldn't control. The Buddha taught about this with remarkable clarity in the Abhidhamma, the detailed analysis of mental processes. He explained that most of our actions don't arise from conscious choice. They arise from sankhara, mental formations, conditioning, the accumulated patterns of how we've responded to life again and again. These patterns live in your body as much as your mind. You might notice that when someone criticizes you, your shoulders immediately rise toward your ears. You didn't decide to do that. It just happens. Or when you feel anxious, you start scrolling through your phone, your thumb moving automatically, seeking distraction from discomfort. Or maybe you notice that you're always rushing, always eating while standing, or walking, always doing 3 things at once, because somewhere along the way, you learned that stopping means falling behind, that rest means weakness, that your worth depends on constant productivity. These patterns were learned. Someone taught you, maybe explicitly, maybe through their own example, that your value comes from doing, not being. That stillness is laziness. That if you're not constantly proving yourself, you're not enough. And now that pattern runs automatically, like software installed so long ago you can't remember the installation. It's become part of how you move through the world, so deeply embedded that it feels like who you are, rather than something you learned. The Buddha's teaching on releasing harmful patterns begins with something beautifully simple, just noticing. Not judging, not fixing, not immediately trying to change. Just seeing clearly what's actually happening. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the foundational discourse on mindfulness, the Buddha teaches, a practitioner, when going, understands, I am going. When standing, understands, I am standing. When sitting, understands, I am sitting. When lying down, understands, I am lying down. This might sound absurdly simple. Of course you know when you're sitting or standing. But do you really? How many times have you arrived somewhere without remembering the journey? How often do you find yourself sitting at your desk without any memory of walking there, your mind completely absorbed in thoughts about the past or worries about the future? How many meals have you eaten without any awareness of the food? Your body going through the motions while your mind rehearses tomorrow's presentation or replays yesterday's conversation. The Buddha is pointing to something profound. Most of the time, you're not actually present for your own life. You're running on autopilot, following patterns you didn't consciously choose, responding from conditioning rather than consciousness. And here's what's important. This isn't your fault. These patterns formed for reasons. Maybe you learnt to rush because when you were young, slowness was punished. Maybe you learnt to avoid conflict because expressing anger wasn't safe. Maybe you learnt to please others at the expense of yourself because that's how you survived. The child you were did what they needed to do to make it through. Those patterns served you once. They protected you, helped you navigate difficult circumstances, kept you as safe as you could be. But now those same patterns might be creating the very suffering you're trying to escape. The Buddha taught that we should approach these patterns with what he called yoniso manasikara, wise attention, skillful reflection. Not harsh judgment, not dismissive acceptance, but clear, kind seeing. In the Vitakkasanthana Sutta, the discourse on removing distracting thoughts, the Buddha offers several methods for working with difficult patterns. But the first method is always the same. Recognize what's happening. Just see it clearly. You might start to notice, for instance, that you have a pattern of saying yes when you mean no. Someone asks you to take on another project, another commitment, and before you've even considered whether you have the capacity, before you've checked in with your actual energy level or existing obligations, you hear yourself saying, "Sure, I can do that." And then you're driving home or lying in bed that night, and you feel it, that familiar heaviness in your chest, that sense of being trapped by your own inability to set boundaries, that resentment building toward a person who simply asked you a question. The first step isn't to force yourself to start saying no. The first step is just to notice the pattern, to see it clearly without layering shame on top of it. Oh, I did it again. I said yes when I meant no. This is a pattern I run. Interesting. That's all. Just seeing. But that seeing is powerful, because you can't change a pattern you don't recognize. And recognition is the beginning of freedom. The Buddha taught that once you begin to see your patterns clearly, you can start to make conscious choices about which ones to keep and which ones to release. But this requires something he called sila, often translated as ethics or morality, but more accurately understood as a wise way of living that doesn't create suffering. In the Upali Sutta, the Buddha explains that ethical conduct isn't about following commandments from an external authority. It's about understanding cause and effect, seeing clearly that certain actions lead to suffering and certain actions lead to peace. He taught that we need to create what we might call ethical anchors, commitments we make to ourselves when we're clear and calm, commitments that protect us when we're not. You might notice this need in your own life. There are moments of clarity when you see with perfect precision what you need to do differently. You see that you need to stop checking work email after 8 p.m. because it's destroying your sleep and your peace. You see that you need to have that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. You see that you need to stop drinking so much because it's not serving you anymore, even though it temporarily numbs the discomfort. In those moments of clarity, you know what's true. You know what would serve your well-being, what would align with your deepest values. But then the moment passes. You're back in the middle of life, with all its pressures and triggers and old patterns. The deadline is approaching. The email is marked urgent. Your boss is asking for immediate response. And suddenly, that clarity about boundaries feels far away, irrelevant, impractical. Or you're at a social gathering and everyone's drinking, and you remember your clarity about alcohol, but you also feel the pull of old habits, the desire to fit in, the discomfort of being different, the fear of being asked why you're not drinking. And your commitment wavers. This is why the Buddha taught about making commitments, not as rigid rules that make you feel guilty when you break them, but as gifts from your clear self to your struggling self. The traditional Buddhist practice is taking precepts, ethical guidelines that protect you from creating suffering. But before we look at the specific precepts, let's understand the spirit behind them. When you're calm and clear, you can see what truly serves your peace and what undermines it. In that clarity, you can make a promise to yourself: when I'm triggered, when I'm afraid, when I'm caught in old patterns, I'll remember this clarity. I'll have this commitment to guide me back. This isn't about becoming perfect or never making mistakes. It's about creating a North Star, a reference point you can return to when you've lost your way. Think about it this way. Imagine you're standing on a mountaintop with a clear view of the landscape below. You can see the winding path through the valley. You can see where the path leads to beautiful meadows and where it leads to dangerous cliffs, where it crosses streams and where it dead ends in swamps. From this vantage point, with this clarity, you draw yourself a map. Then you descend into the valley. Now you're in the thick of it, trees blocking your view, fog rolling in, the path less clear, uncertainty at every turn. But you have the map you drew from the mountaintop. That map, created in clarity, can guide you even when you can't see clearly anymore. The Buddhist precepts are like that map. They're wisdom from your higher self, protecting you when you're lost in the fog of reactivity, fear, or habit. The Buddha offered 5 basic precepts as a foundation for ethical conduct. Not as commandments from an external God, but as observations about what creates suffering and what creates peace. Not as burdens, but as gifts you give yourself. Let's look at each one, not as abstract rules, but as practical wisdom for your actual life. The first precept is traditionally translated as not killing or not taking life. At its most obvious level, this means not murdering, not deliberately ending another person's life. Most of us aren't struggling with that one. But the precept goes deeper. It's about recognizing the preciousness of all life and choosing not to cause harm. You might notice this playing out when you're about to kill a spider in your house. That moment of choice. Do you end this small life because it's inconvenient? Or do you find a way to coexist, perhaps catching it gently and releasing it outside? The precept also extends to how you treat your own life force, your own vitality. When you push yourself past the point of exhaustion, when you ignore your body's signals for rest, when you speak to yourself with harshness that you'd never direct at another living being, you're violating the spirit of this precept. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha teaches, all beings tremble before violence. All fear death. All love life. See yourself in others. Then whom can you hurt? What harm can you do? This isn't about being perfect or never causing any harm at all. That's impossible in a world where simply eating requires the death of plants, where walking might step on insects, where our very existence has some impact. It's about cultivating awareness and minimizing harm where you reasonably can. It's about asking yourself, is this action protecting life or diminishing it? Am I moving toward more care or more carelessness? Does this serve life or does it serve my temporary convenience? The second precept is about not taking what isn't freely given, traditionally called not stealing. Again, most of us aren't shoplifting or robbing banks. But the precept addresses something more subtle, our relationship with resources, with what belongs to others, with the earth itself. You might notice this when you're at work, and you take office supplies home without asking, telling yourself, it doesn't matter, the company can afford it. Or when you use someone else's time without consideration, showing up late consistently, expecting them to wait, treating their time as less valuable than yours. Or when you consume far more than you need, food, energy, goods, while others go without. The precept also speaks to how you use your own resources. When you waste money on things that don't truly serve you, when you squander your time and energy on distractions that leave you depleted, when you hoard more than you could ever use while refusing to share, these too are violations of right relationship with resources. In the Digha Nikaya, the Buddha teaches about the principle of santuti, contentment, being satisfied with what's sufficient, not endlessly grasping for more. This isn't about artificial scarcity or denying yourself what you genuinely need. It's about recognizing the difference between enough and the endless hunger of greed. You might ask yourself, am I taking more than I need? Am I taking without permission or consideration? Am I in right relationship with what I have and what I use? Do I use resources wisely or wastefully? The third precept addresses sexual conduct, not causing harm through sexual activity. The traditional language is often about adultery, but the deeper principle is about honoring the trust and vulnerability inherent in intimate relationships. This means not using sex to manipulate, control, or harm. Not betraying commitments you've made to partners. Not engaging in sexual activity that creates suffering for yourself or others. But it also extends more broadly to how you engage in all intimate relationships. Are you honest about your intentions? Do you respect boundaries, both others and your own? Are you present and caring, or are you using another person to fill an emptiness in yourself? The Buddha taught in the Sigalovada Sutta about the importance of mutual respect, faithfulness, and care in relationships. This isn't about rigid rules regarding who can be intimate with whom. It's about ensuring that your intimate life creates connection rather than harm, trust rather than betrayal, genuine care rather than exploitation. You might ask yourself, are my intimate relationships based on honesty and mutual respect? Am I honoring the commitments I've made? Am I causing harm through my sexual or romantic choices? Am I treating others with the dignity they deserve? The fourth precept is about truthful speech, not lying, not speaking in ways that deceive or harm. This goes beyond just not telling outright lies. It includes not exaggerating to make yourself look better, not minimizing to avoid discomfort, not staying silent when speaking up would serve truth and well-being. You might notice this when you're asked how you're doing and you automatically say, "Fine," even though you're struggling, because honesty feels too vulnerable. Or when you embellish a story to make it more impressive, adding details that didn't quite happen that way. Or when you agree with something you actually disagree with because speaking your truth might create conflict. But the precept also recognizes that truth must be balanced with kindness. In the Abhaya Sutta, the Buddha teaches that before speaking, we should ask ourselves, is it true? Is it beneficial? Is it the right time? Sometimes the most truthful thing you can say would cause unnecessary harm. If your grandmother shows you her new haircut that you find unflattering, you don't need to tell her it makes her look terrible. You can find something true and kind to say about her courage to try something new, about how happy she seems, about something genuinely positive you notice. The commitment is to speak in ways that serve truth and reduce suffering, not to use honesty as a weapon or excuse for cruelty. You might ask yourself, am I speaking truthfully? Are my words creating clarity or confusion? Am I using speech to connect or to harm? Is what I'm about to say true, beneficial, and timely? The fifth precept addresses intoxicants, not consuming substances that cloud the mind and lead to heedlessness. The traditional teaching focuses on alcohol and drugs, and this remains relevant. When you're intoxicated, you lose access to your clarity, your judgment, your ability to keep your other commitments. The things you wouldn't normally do suddenly seem reasonable. The boundaries you've set for yourself suddenly seem negotiable. There's a teaching story where a man is given a choice between breaking one of the precepts, killing a goat, sleeping with his neighbor's wife, getting drunk, or telling a lie. He chooses getting drunk, thinking it's the least harmful. But once drunk, he ends up doing all four of the others. The point isn't that alcohol is uniquely evil, but that it undermines your capacity to make wise choices. But the precept extends beyond just alcohol and recreational drugs. It's about anything you consume that clouds your clarity and keeps you from being present. For some people, this might be food, using eating to numb feelings, to escape from discomfort, consuming in ways that create a fog between you and your actual experience. For others, it might be digital consumption, endless scrolling, binge watching, gaming, to the point where you're not present for your actual life. For others still, it might be work itself, using busyness as an intoxicant to avoid feeling what you're feeling. The question isn't whether something is inherently bad. The question is, does this consumption help me stay awake, present, and clear? Or does it cloud my mind and lead me toward heedlessness? In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha teaches about appamada versus pamada, heedfulness versus heedlessness, being awake to your life versus sleepwalking through it. The precept about intoxicants is fundamentally about choosing wakefulness. You might ask yourself, what am I consuming that keeps me from being present? What substances or activities do I use to escape from reality? Am I staying awake to my life, or finding ways to check out? Does this serve my clarity or cloud it? Now, here's what's crucial to understand about these 5 precepts. They're not rigid commandments designed to make you feel guilty when you fall short. They're invitations to freedom, guides toward less suffering. Each precept is essentially asking, would you like to suffer less? Would you like more peace in your life? Then here's a pattern to notice and gently release. When you harm life, including your own, through harsh self-treatment, you create suffering. When you take what isn't given, you create suffering. When you betray trust in intimate relationships, you create suffering. When you speak dishonestly, you create suffering. When you cloud your mind with intoxicants, you create conditions for all kinds of suffering. The precepts aren't asking you to be perfect. They're asking you to become aware of these patterns and to gently, gradually move toward less harm and more care. You might work with these precepts by choosing one to focus on for a week or a month. Not trying to achieve perfection, but just bringing awareness to how this pattern shows up in your life. Maybe you choose to work with truthful speech. For 1 week, you simply notice when you're tempted to lie, exaggerate, or hide truth. You don't necessarily force yourself to be perfectly honest in every moment. That might not be wise or kind. You just notice the impulse, the pattern, the habit. And maybe, when it feels possible and appropriate, you choose truth over deception. Just once. Just in this moment. And you notice how that feels. The relief, perhaps, or the vulnerability, or both. This is how transformation happens, not through dramatic overnight change, but through small, repeated choices toward clarity and care. The Buddha taught that keeping these precepts isn't a burden. It's a form of self-love, a way of protecting yourself from creating suffering. Each precept is a gift you give to your future self, a commitment that says, even when I'm triggered, even when I'm scared, even when I want to fall back into old patterns, I've decided to move toward less harm and more peace. And when you do break a precept, when you lie, when you harm, when you betray your own commitments, the practice isn't self-flagellation. The practice is honest acknowledgement, genuine remorse that comes from seeing the harm created, and renewed commitment to do differently next time. In the Angulimala Sutta, there's a teaching about a man who had killed many people and then, upon meeting the Buddha, completely transformed his life. The Buddha didn't say his past made him irredeemable. He said, "You were heedless before. Now be heedful. That's what matters." This is the spirit of working with the precepts. You've been heedless, running patterns you didn't choose, creating suffering without fully realizing it. Now you're becoming aware. Now you're choosing differently. That's what matters. The patterns that have been running your life don't have to keep running you. You can see them clearly, without shame, just as they are. You can make commitments in your moments of clarity that protect you in moments of confusion. And you can use these 5 simple guidelines as a map back to peace when you've lost your way. This is how you release what hurts, not through force or harsh judgment, but through gentle awareness, wise commitment, and patient practice. One pattern at a time, one choice at a time, one breath at a time. The freedom you're seeking isn't far away. It's right here. In each moment, you choose awareness over autopilot, care over carelessness, truth over deception, presence over numbness. And that choice is always available to you. Right now, in this very moment. There's something important the Buddha understood about transformation that often gets missed. It's not enough to simply stop doing what harms. You can spend your whole life focused on not lying, not stealing, not causing harm, and while that's valuable, it's only half the path. It's like pulling weeds from a garden but never planting anything. You end up with empty soil, barren ground, space that invites new weeds to grow. The Buddha taught that after you release harmful patterns, you need to actively cultivate wholesome ones. Not just removing what hurts, but planting what heals. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha explains this clearly. He says that ethical conduct has two aspects: restraint from harmful actions and active cultivation of beneficial ones. Both are necessary. You can't have a thriving garden with just one. Think about it this way. If you've been habitually harsh with yourself, you can work on stopping that harshness, noticing when you're about to say something cruel to yourself, and choosing silence instead. That's good. That's important. But if you only stop the harshness without replacing it with anything, you're left with a kind of neutral void. What transforms you is actively cultivating kindness toward yourself, speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you dearly love, offering yourself encouragement and tenderness, treating your struggles with compassion. The positive practice doesn't just fill the space left by what you've removed. It actually makes it easier to maintain the restraint. When you're actively nourishing yourself with kindness, harsh self-talk naturally has less appeal. When you're actively generous, hoarding loses its grip. When you're actively protecting life, causing harm feels more and more foreign to who you're becoming. This is why the Buddha didn't just teach 5 precepts about what not to do. He also taught their positive counterparts, active commitments to what you will do, what you will cultivate, what you will become. Let's look at each one, not as rules to follow, but as invitations to a life that feeds you rather than depletes you. Where the first precept says, not killing, not harming life, the positive practice is actively protecting and nurturing life. This goes beyond simply not killing the spider in your bathroom. It's about becoming someone who notices life, who values it, who looks for ways to support and protect it. You might notice opportunities for this throughout your day. When you see a plant wilting, you water it. When you notice an insect struggling in water, you help it out. When you encounter a creature in distress, you pause and consider what might help. But it also extends to how you treat yourself. Your own life force, your own vitality, this too deserves protection and care. In the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the Buddha's discourse on loving kindness, He teaches, just as a mother would protect her only child with her life, even so let one cultivate a boundless love toward all beings. Notice he doesn't say all beings except yourself. You are included in that circle of care. This means noticing when you're depleted and choosing rest. Noticing when you're hungry and feeding yourself with care, not just convenience. Noticing when your body needs movement and offering it gentle activity. Noticing when your mind needs quiet and creating space for stillness. It means treating your health as sacred, not in some lofty spiritual sense, but in the practical sense that this body is the vehicle for your practice, your growth, your capacity to be of service. When you actively protect life, something shifts in how you move through the world. You become more careful, more attentive, more gentle. You start to notice the life you might have previously overlooked. The birds singing outside your window, the tree providing shade on a hot day, the insects working in the garden. This awareness itself is healing. It connects you to something larger than your own small concerns, reminds you that you're part of an intricate web of living things, all struggling to survive, all worthy of care. You might ask yourself, how am I protecting life today? Not just avoiding harm, but actively nurturing, supporting, caring for the life around me and within me. And here's what's beautiful about this practice. It changes you. The more you actively protect and care for life, the more sensitive you become to suffering, the more natural it becomes to move with gentleness rather than force. There's a story in the Jataka tales about the Buddha in a past life as a merchant who, while traveling through the desert, discovered his caravan's water supply was about to run out. They dug for water and finally found it, but there was a family of quail nesting where they needed to dig. The merchant had a choice. He could disturb the nest to access the water his people desperately needed, or he could move on and risk everyone's life. He chose to protect the birds and search elsewhere. They found water in another location. Everyone survived. The teaching isn't that you should always sacrifice human needs for animal welfare. The teaching is that reverence for life, all life, can guide you to solutions that protect everyone when you're willing to look for them. Where the second precept says, not taking what isn't given, the positive practice is generosity, actively giving, sharing, offering what you have. This is one of the most celebrated practices in Buddhism. Dana, generosity, is considered the foundation of spiritual life. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha teaches, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without first giving, nor would the stain of selfishness overcome their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without sharing if there was someone to receive their gift. Now, this doesn't mean you should give away your last bite of food and go hungry. Remember the middle way. The Buddha himself accepted the bowl of rice milk when he needed nourishment. What he's pointing to is the joy of generosity, the freedom that comes from breaking the grip of hoarding and scarcity. You might notice two extremes with resources. Some people hoard, holding on to far more than they need, driven by fear of not having enough, unable to let anything go, even when others are in genuine need. Others squander, spending thoughtlessly, consuming without consideration, wasting resources that could serve real needs. The middle way between these is wise generosity, giving freely while also stewarding resources responsibly. In the Sigalovada Sutta, the Buddha gives practical advice about managing wealth. He suggests dividing resources into 4 parts: 1 part for immediate needs, 2 parts invested for the future, and 1 part given away in generosity. This isn't a rigid formula you must follow precisely. It's a principle. Take care of your genuine needs, plan wisely for the future, and make generosity a regular practice rather than an occasional impulse. You might notice that generosity doesn't always mean money. Sometimes the most generous thing you can offer is your time, your attention, your presence with someone who's struggling. Sometimes it's sharing your skills, teaching someone something you know, helping with a task that's easy for you but difficult for them. Sometimes it's sharing resources you're not using, the coat hanging in your closet that you haven't worn in years while someone else is cold, the food in your pantry that will expire before you eat it while someone else is hungry. The Buddha taught about the immediate benefits of generosity in the Dakinavibhanga Sutta. He explained that when you give, several things happen right away. You feel joy in the act of giving, you connect with the recipient, you loosen the grip of greed in your own mind, and you plant seeds for future abundance. You can test this in your own experience. Notice how you feel when you genuinely give something, not to get something back, not to look good, not out of obligation, but from actual generosity. There's a lightness to it, isn't there? A sense of freedom, of your resources flowing rather than stagnating. And notice how different that feels from hoarding, the tightness, the fear, the contracted energy of holding on. The practice of generosity isn't about depleting yourself or giving to the point where you have nothing left. It's about finding the joy of sharing, of circulation, of abundance that comes from letting things flow rather than trying to hold on to everything. There's a deeper teaching here about the nature of wealth itself. In the Pabbaja Sutta, the Buddha speaks about true wealth versus material wealth. He says that the person who is content, who has few wants, who lives simply, this person is truly wealthy, even if they own very little. Meanwhile, the person who constantly wants more, who's never satisfied, no matter how much they accumulate, this person lives in poverty, even surrounded by abundance. Generosity is the practice that transforms your relationship with having and not having. When you give freely, you prove to yourself that you have enough to share. You break the spell of scarcity that says you must hold on to everything or you'll be left with nothing. And here's something remarkable. The more you practice generosity, the more you notice opportunities to give. It's as if the world opens up, showing you countless ways to share what you have, to contribute to others' well-being, to participate in the circulation of care that holds communities together. You might ask yourself, what can I give today? Not out of obligation or guilt, but from genuine generosity. What do I have in excess that could serve someone else's genuine need? Where the third precept says, not causing harm through sexual misconduct, the positive practice is cultivating healthy, honest, caring relationships. This extends far beyond just sexual or romantic relationships. It's about how you relate to all people, with integrity, respect, genuine care for their well-being. The Buddha taught extensively about kalyana mittata, spiritual friendship, wholesome companionship. In the Upada Sutta, his attendant Ananda says to him, "Venerable Sir, this is half of the spiritual life. Good friendship, good companionship, good association." The Buddha corrects him, "Not so, Ananda. This is the entire spiritual life. Good friendship, good companionship, good association." Think about that. The entire spiritual life depends on the quality of your relationships. This doesn't mean you need dozens of spiritual friends or that you're doing something wrong if you feel isolated. It means that the relationships you do have, including your relationship with yourself, profoundly shape your capacity for growth and freedom. The Buddha describes true friendship in the Sigalovada Sutta. A good friend, he says, helps you when you're in trouble, doesn't abandon you in difficulty, protects you when you're vulnerable, and rejoices in your success rather than envying it. A good friend also prevents you from wrongdoing, encourages you in doing good, tells you what you need to hear, even when it's difficult, and reveals the path to happiness. But here's what's crucial. The teaching isn't about finding these perfect friends who will do all this for you. It's about becoming this kind of friend to others. You might notice a pattern in how you approach relationships. Do you enter them asking, "What can I get from this person?" Or, "What can I offer?" Neither extreme is healthy. Relationships that are purely transactional, where you're only giving to get, feel hollow and draining. But relationships where you're only taking and never offering anything create resentment and imbalance. The healthiest relationships are ones where both people are genuinely oriented toward giving, towards supporting each other's well-being and growth. Not keeping score, not calculating who's contributed more, but both showing up with the question, how can I support your flourishing? In the Metta Sutta, the Buddha teaches about cultivating boundless loving kindness. This isn't romantic love or the attachment we often confuse with love. It's the genuine wish for another's well-being, their freedom from suffering, their peace and happiness. You can practice this in your actual relationships. Instead of approaching a conversation thinking about what you want to say or how you want the other person to change, you might try approaching with the intention, may you be well. May you be at peace. What do you need right now? This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or abandoning your own needs. Remember, the middle way applies here too. You can care for others while also maintaining healthy boundaries, speaking your truth, taking care of yourself. But when your primary orientation in relationship shifts from what can I get to what can I offer, everything changes. Paradoxically, this is often when you receive the most, not because you're trying to get something, but because genuine care creates genuine connection, and connection naturally includes reciprocity. You might ask yourself, in my relationships, am I primarily taking or giving? Am I showing up with an open heart, genuinely interested in others' well-being? Am I the kind of friend I wish I had? Where the fourth precept says, not lying, the positive practice is speaking truthfully, kindly, and helpfully. In the Abhaya Sutta, the Buddha gives detailed teaching about right speech. He says we should speak words that are true, beneficial, and timely, spoken with a mind of loving kindness. This is more than just not lying. It's actively using speech to create understanding, to heal division, to encourage what's good in others, to share wisdom that might help. You might notice how often you speak on autopilot, making small talk, filling silence, saying what you think others want to hear, rather than what's true and helpful. The positive practice of right speech asks you to become more conscious. Before speaking, you might pause and consider, is this true? Is it helpful? Is this the right time to say it? Will it create more understanding or more confusion? The Buddha also taught about 4 kinds of speech to cultivate: speaking truthfully, speaking harmoniously to create unity rather than division, speaking gently rather than harshly, and speaking meaningfully rather than engaging in idle chatter. Harmonious speech doesn't mean pretending there's agreement when there isn't. It means looking for what unites, rather than always emphasizing what divides, seeking common ground, speaking in ways that build bridges rather than walls. Gentle speech doesn't mean being weak or dishonest. You can speak difficult truths gently. You can set firm boundaries kindly. Gentleness is about the energy you bring to speech, care for the other person's dignity, even when you're disagreeing or correcting. Meaningful speech doesn't mean you can never joke or make small talk. It means being conscious of whether your words serve a purpose beyond just filling air, beyond just hearing yourself talk. You might notice how much energy gets wasted in gossip, in complaining, in rehashing the same stories about how you were wronged, in speech that doesn't move anything forward or create any benefit. What if you redirected that energy towards speech that actually helps? Words of encouragement to someone struggling, honest appreciation for what someone contributes, sharing wisdom or insights that might genuinely serve someone's growth. The Buddha taught that right speech is a gift you give to everyone who hears you. When people know they can trust what you say, when they experience your words as helpful rather than harmful, as unifying rather than divisive, as kind rather than cruel, you become someone they can turn to, someone whose presence creates safety. You might ask yourself, am I using speech to help or to harm? Are my words creating more understanding or more confusion? Am I speaking from a place of care or from reactivity? Where the fifth precept says, not consuming intoxicants that cloud the mind, the positive practice is cultivating clarity, awareness, and presence. This is perhaps the most fundamental practice of all. Everything else depends on being awake, being present, being able to see clearly what's actually happening. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha teaches detailed practices for developing mindfulness, awareness of the body, feelings, mind states, and mental patterns. This isn't abstract meditation divorced from daily life. It's about being fully present for whatever you're doing. When you're eating, you're fully present with eating, noticing the colors, textures, flavors, the movements of chewing and swallowing, the sensations in your body. When you're walking, you're present with walking, feeling your feet touching the ground, your body moving through space, the rhythm of your breath. When you're speaking with someone, you're actually there, not planning what you'll say next, not thinking about something else, but genuinely listening, genuinely present. This quality of presence is what makes everything else possible. You can't practice kindness if you're not present enough to notice when kindness is needed. You can't practice generosity if you're too distracted to see opportunities to give. You can't practice right speech if you're on autopilot, words tumbling out without awareness. The positive practice here is actively cultivating the conditions for clarity. This might mean creating space for formal meditation practice, even just 10 minutes a day of sitting quietly, following your breath, returning to presence when your mind wanders. It might mean being more selective about what you consume, choosing media that enhances rather than clouds your awareness, foods that create clarity rather than dullness, activities that energize rather than numb. It might mean simplifying your life so there's room for presence, saying no to some commitments so you're not perpetually overwhelmed, creating margins in your schedule so you're not always rushing from one thing to the next. The Buddha taught in the Dhammapada, heedfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. The heedful never die. The heedless are as if already dead. What he means is that being present for your life, actually awake, actually here, is what it means to be truly alive. And moving through life on autopilot, numbed, distracted, never fully here, that's a kind of death, even while your body still breathes. You might ask yourself, am I awake to my life? Am I present for this moment, or am I somewhere else in my thoughts? What supports my clarity, and what clouds it? Now, let's bring all of this together. The 5 positive practices: protecting life, cultivating generosity, nurturing healthy relationships, speaking truthfully and kindly, and maintaining presence. These aren't separate items on a spiritual to-do list. They're facets of a wholesome life, ways of being that naturally support each other. When you're present and clear, you naturally notice opportunities for kindness and generosity. When you're generous, you naturally become less self-centered and more attuned to others' needs. When you speak truthfully and kindly, you naturally build relationships of trust and care. When you protect life, you naturally develop tenderness and reverence that infuses everything you do. These practices feed each other, creating an upward spiral. The more you cultivate wholesome actions, the more natural they become. The more natural they become, the less you're fighting against yourself, the less internal friction you experience. And this is where real transformation happens. Not from forcing yourself to be different, not from harsh self-discipline, but from actively cultivating what naturally draws you toward freedom and away from suffering. The Buddha taught that wholesome actions bring their own reward. When you protect life, you feel more connected to the living world. When you're generous, you experience abundance, even with less. When you nurture relationships from a place of giving, you experience genuine intimacy. When you speak truthfully and kindly, you create trust and safety around you. When you stay present and clear, you actually experience your life instead of sleepwalking through it. These aren't rewards that come later, in some future life or heavenly realm. They're the immediate fruits of how you're choosing to live right now. You might start with just one of these practices, not trying to become perfect at all, 5 at once, but choosing one to emphasize this week or this month. Maybe you choose generosity. For this week, you look for one opportunity each day to give something, your time, your attention, your resources, your skills. And you notice how it feels, what it does to your relationship with abundance and scarcity, how it affects your sense of connection with others. Or maybe you choose presence. For this week, you commit to really being there for your meals, putting away your phone, turning off distractions, actually tasting your food, noticing your body's responses. And you notice how different it feels to be fully present versus eating on autopilot. Whatever you choose, the practice is the same, actively cultivating what heals, planting flowers in the garden of your life, not just pulling weeds. The Buddha's final teaching, given on his deathbed, was simply, all conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. He wasn't telling you to be anxious or to push yourself harshly. He was reminding you that you have limited time, that this life is precious, that what you cultivate now matters. So what will you cultivate? What will you plant in the garden of your days? Will you actively protect life, including your own? Will you practice generosity that frees you from scarcity? Will you nurture relationships from a place of genuine care? Will you speak words that heal rather than harm? Will you stay awake to your life, present for this irreplaceable moment? These aren't questions to answer once. They're questions to keep asking, practices to keep returning to, seeds to keep planting. The garden of your life is waiting, and every moment is a chance to cultivate what heals. There's something simple you do every day that can become a profound practice. Something so ordinary you probably don't think of it as spiritual at all. Eating. The Buddha taught extensively about food, not with rigid rules about what you can and cannot eat, but with wisdom about the relationship between what you consume and the clarity of your mind. In the Pali Canon, there's a reflection the Buddha taught monks to practice before eating. He instructed them to consider, wisely reflecting, I use this food not for fun, not for pleasure, not for fattening, not for beautification, but only for the maintenance and nourishment of this body. for keeping it healthy, for helping with the spiritual life. Now, this doesn't mean you can't enjoy your food. The Buddha wasn't suggesting you eat with grim determination, treating every meal like medicine you have to choke down. What he's pointing to is intention, understanding why you're eating, what purpose it serves. You might notice different intentions behind eating. Sometimes you eat because you're genuinely hungry. Your body needs fuel. But other times, you eat because you're bored, or anxious, or lonely, or because it's simply there, in front of you. The practice isn't to stop eating for these reasons and feel guilty when you do. The practice is to become aware of what's actually driving you to eat in any given moment. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha talks about 4 ways of taking food. Some eat like animals, greedily and without awareness. Some eat like children, for pleasure and taste. Some eat like the sick, for health and medicine. And some eat like practitioners, with full awareness and moderation, treating food as fuel for awakening. You can probably recognize all 4 of these in your own eating habits at different times. There are meals you've eaten so quickly, so mindlessly, that you barely tasted them, shoveling food in while watching screens, thinking about other things, barely present for the actual experience. There are times you've eaten purely for pleasure, seeking the dopamine hit of sugar or fat or salt, using food as entertainment or comfort rather than nourishment. There are times you've eaten carefully for health, choosing foods you know will serve your body well, even if they're not the most pleasurable option. And perhaps there have been rare moments when you've eaten with complete presence, actually tasting the food, noticing the textures and flavors, feeling gratitude for what's nourishing you, aware that this simple act is what keeps you alive and able to practice. The Buddha taught that the battle with food isn't won at the table. It's won at the market, at the store, in the choices you make about what comes into your home. Once something is in your kitchen, in your refrigerator, the impulse to eat it becomes much harder to resist. But when you're at the store, you can make wise choices with relative ease, choosing foods that will nourish rather than cloud, energize rather than deplete. This isn't about rigid diets or punishing yourself for wanting foods you enjoy. Remember the middle way. The Buddha accepted the rice milk when he needed nourishment. He didn't insist on only eating the plainest, most medicinal foods. It's about asking yourself, will this food support my clarity and energy, or will it make me sluggish and foggy? Will eating this serve my practice or undermine it? The reason the Buddha emphasized this is practical, not moralistic. He observed that certain foods make meditation easier and others make it harder. Heavy, greasy foods create dullness. Too much food creates sleepiness. Too little creates distraction and weakness. And he observed that how you eat matters as much as what you eat. When you eat with awareness, sitting down, putting away distractions, actually noticing what you're eating, you naturally eat less and enjoy it more. You can taste the food. Notice when you're satisfied. Stop before you're uncomfortably full. When you eat unconsciously, standing at the counter, scrolling through your phone, barely aware food is entering your mouth, you consume far more and enjoy it far less. The practice is simple. Treat at least one meal a day as a meditation. Sit down, put away your phone, look at the food before you. Notice the colors, the arrangement, the steam rising, if it's hot. Take a moment to consider where this food came from, the sun that grew it, the rain that watered it, the hands that harvested and prepared it, the countless causes and conditions that brought it to your plate. Then eat slowly, consciously. Taste each bite. Notice the textures, the flavors, how they change as you chew. Feel your body's response, the satisfaction of hunger being met, the energy beginning to return. This simple practice can transform your relationship with food from something unconscious and often problematic into something nourishing and peaceful. But it also does something more. It connects you to a fundamental truth. The Buddha taught, we are interdependent with all of life. Every meal is proof of this. You cannot feed yourself alone. You depend on soil and sun and rain, on farmers and truckers and store workers, on an intricate web of conditions that had to align perfectly for this food to reach you. This brings us to one of the most important teachings for our time, the teaching on interdependence. The Dalai Lama has spoken extensively about this, arguing that ethics for this century must be based not on religious doctrine, but on the simple recognition of how deeply interconnected we all are. In his book, Ethics for a New Millennium, he writes that whether we like it or not, we're all connected. What happens to one person affects everyone else. Your well-being and my well-being are not separate. This isn't mystical philosophy. It's observable reality. The COVID-19 pandemic made this undeniable. When a virus emerged in one city, within months it had spread to every corner of the globe. Borders didn't stop it. Walls didn't stop it. Wealth didn't stop it. We discovered viscerally what the Buddha taught 2,600 years ago. We are not separate, isolated individuals. We are woven together in ways we can't escape even when we try. Your health depends on your neighbor's health. Your safety depends on your community's safety. Your economy depends on the economies of countries halfway around the world. The Buddha taught this in the Indra's net metaphor, a vast net stretching infinitely in all directions, with a jewel at each intersection that reflects every other jewel. Change one jewel and all the reflections change. Everything affects everything else. Once you really see this interdependence, ethics becomes obvious. It's not about being good to earn rewards or avoid punishment. It's about recognizing that harming others harms you, that helping others helps you, that there's no such thing as benefiting yourself at the expense of others, because we're not actually separate. In the Sigalovada Sutta, the Buddha gives practical advice about how to live in recognition of interdependence. He talks about how to relate to parents, to teachers, to friends, to workers, to spiritual guides, each relationship having duties and responsibilities that flow both ways. He's describing a web of mutual care and support, where everyone's flourishing depends on everyone else's flourishing. This is radically different from the competitive, zero-sum thinking that dominates so much of modern life. The idea that for me to win, you have to lose, that resources are scarce, and we're all fighting for our share. The Buddha's teaching is that when we're truly interdependent, the best solutions are ones where everyone benefits. Not win-lose, but win-win. This applies at every level. In your personal relationships, are you looking for solutions where both people's needs are met? Or are you approaching conflicts as battles to be won? In your work, are you contributing to systems that create well-being for everyone involved? Or are you participating in exploitation, in structures where some people benefit at others' expense? In your consumption, are you aware of how your choices affect people and ecosystems far away? Or are you living as if your actions have no impact beyond your immediate experience? The teaching on interdependence isn't meant to make you feel guilty or overwhelmed. It's meant to help you see clearly so you can make wise choices. When you see that your neighbor's well-being is your well-being, you naturally become interested in your neighbor's welfare, not from some abstract moral obligation, but from clear-eyed recognition of how things actually work. The Buddha taught in the Karaniya Metta Sutta to extend loving kindness to all beings, not because it's a nice thing to do, but because recognizing our fundamental connectedness is the path to freedom from suffering. When you understand that you're not a separate, isolated self, but a node in an infinite web of relationships, everything changes. Compassion becomes natural rather than forced. Generosity becomes obvious rather than sacrificial. Ethical conduct becomes wisdom rather than restriction. So what does all of this mean for you? Right now, today? It means the path doesn't start someday when you're more prepared, more knowledgeable, more spiritual. It starts now. This moment. You don't need permission to begin practicing. You don't need to complete some training or achieve some level of understanding first. You can start exactly where you are, with exactly what you have. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha teaches, do not neglect your own welfare for the sake of another, however great. Clearly understand your own welfare and be intent upon the highest good. This isn't selfishness. It's recognizing that you can't give what you don't have. You can't offer peace to others if you're in turmoil. You can't support others' awakening if you're not tending to your own practice. So the practice begins with one small choice. Maybe it's the choice to eat your next meal with awareness instead of distraction. That's enough. That's practice. Maybe it's the choice to take one conscious breath before responding to someone instead of reacting automatically. That's enough. That's transformation. Maybe it's the choice to give something away today. Your time, your attention, a resource you don't need, not to get anything back, but simply to practice generosity. That's enough. That's the path. The Buddha taught that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But he also taught something more important. That single step is the entire journey. Each moment of awareness is complete in itself. Each choice toward kindness is the whole path, not just a step on the path. You don't need to wait until you're perfect to start practicing. You practice and gradually, naturally, perfection takes care of itself, or you discover that perfection was never the point, that the practice itself is what matters. There's tremendous freedom in understanding this. You don't have to fix yourself before you begin. You don't have to become someone else. You just have to show up for this moment with as much awareness as you can muster. Make the wisest choice available to you right now, and then show up for the next moment and do it again. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha describes this as the direct path, not a complicated, convoluted journey requiring years of preparation, but a straightforward practice of presence that can begin right now. One breath at a time, one choice at a time, one moment at a time. You might notice that you want to make dramatic changes, to overhaul your entire life at once. That's the mind looking for the quick fix, the magic solution, the transformation that requires no patience or persistence. But the Buddha's path is gentler and more sustainable than that. It's about small changes, repeated consistently, that gradually reshape who you are and how you move through the world. It's about practicing mindfulness with your morning coffee, really tasting it instead of gulping it down while doing 3 other things. It's about choosing to speak kindly instead of harshly, just this once in this conversation. It's about noticing the impulse to scroll mindlessly through your phone and choosing presence instead. These aren't grand gestures. They're not impressive to anyone watching. But they're everything. Because today's choices become tomorrow's habits. Tomorrow's habits become next year's character. Next year's character becomes the trajectory of your entire life. The Buddha's final words spoken on his deathbed were, "All conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence." He wasn't telling you to be anxious or frantic. He was reminding you that you have this one precious life, that time passes whether you're awake to it or not, that what you do with these moments matters. So don't wait. Don't postpone your peace until conditions are perfect. Don't delay your practice until you feel more prepared. Start now, right here, with this breath, with this choice, with this moment of awareness that's available to you, even as you're reading these words. The path is not somewhere else. The practice is not some future achievement. It's here, now, in how you meet this very moment. Will you meet it with awareness or autopilot? With kindness or harshness? With presence or distraction? That's all the Buddha is asking. Not perfection, not sainthood, not some impossible standard. Just this moment, met with as much clarity and care as you can offer. And then the next moment, and the next. This is how awakening happens. Not in some dramatic flash of enlightenment, but in these simple, repeated choices to stay present, to choose wisely, to move toward less harm and more care. The garden of your life is growing right now, in this moment. What you're planting today is what you'll harvest tomorrow. So plant with care. Plant with awareness. Plant seeds of peace, of kindness, of clarity, of freedom. And trust that in time, with patience and persistence, those seeds will grow into something beautiful, a life lived with wisdom, with compassion, with the deep peace that comes from moving with reality instead of against it. The practice begins now, and now is always available to you. You've been sitting here for 3 hours, and in that time something has shifted. maybe just slightly, maybe more than you realize yet. We've walked through the garden of karma, seeing how every seed you plant grows into your lived experience. We've explored the middle way, that wise path between pushing too hard and not trying enough. We've looked at what hurts and how to gently release it, and what heals and how to actively cultivate it. All of it pointing to one simple truth: you have the capacity to change your life, one conscious choice at a time. The Buddha didn't teach complicated philosophy requiring years of study before you can begin. He taught a direct path: awareness,